Que ha aumentado en China y también a prestar atención en, sobre todo en Europa.
The world is scrambling to stop the spread of COVID-19. More and more cases are popping up in countries far from the epicenter of the outbreak. Tonight, the breaking news is about the confirmed coronavirus in Kerala. One person found having coronavirus, first confirmed case. Now, more new cases of coronavirus being reported outside China for the first time.
Across the globe, there are staggering figures coming out in relation to the coronavirus. In India, the number of cases now stands at more than 1 million.
आपको बता दें, देश भर में जो कोरोना के बड़े हॉटस्पॉट्स हैं, वहां से एबीपी न्यूज के रिपोर्टर्स हमसे लाइव जुड़ रहे हैं। भारत में बता रहे हैं आपको कोरोना के केस 1,38,845 पहुंच गए हैं।
Italia registra cifras récord en el número de muertos por el COVID-19.
Atención que el Ministerio de Salud acaba de confirmar el primer caso de coronavirus en Colombia.
And fellow Kenyans, I want to inform you that the Ministry of Health has confirmed the first coronavirus case in Kenya.
And our corner of the world almost came to a halt. People's daily routines were frozen by the onslaught of the Chinese virus, or at least that was the official version. The media told us about it in December, but they forgot to mention that it would be on our doorstep within a few months. The first cases of the virus were detected in early March, and quarantine was declared on 23rd of March. Isolation became the order of the day. Stay indoors, they said, and we did, peeking out our windows for any sign of life or a change of circumstances that would announce the return to the notion of normality that we had so become used to. But no such signs came. Instead, all that was left to report was numbers. Numbers of how many were infected, numbers of how many had died, and numbers of those who had recovered from a disease that they hadn't imagined they would suffer in their wildest dreams. And there were the voices of those who have the arduous job of governing us, some genuinely concerned about public health and safety, others using the opportunity to their political advantage, and yet others who have absolutely no clue of how to be worthy of the office they hold. There was also a heavy sense of uncertainty about how things would unfold over time, and uncertainty is something humans don't usually like. Our instincts always look for a zone of comfort, and every time something shakes us out of this zone, we try best to recover the status quo, and only then do we feel at peace again. Well, as it turns out, this disequilibrium was here to stay, and it would take us a long time to come to terms with it. And in this new state of affairs, we entered into a cocoon-like existence in which stepping outdoors was prohibited at first, and later allowed with restrictions, but discouraged strongly. Within this locked-down existence, some things didn't change much, others did, and yet others, which had been in the background, now came into the limelight. There was many a sunny day filled with tropical heat, and some wet ones too. The moon patrolled the night sky as it's always done, revealing a phase at a time of its mysterious landscape. and the evening breeze continued to sail past our street, bringing respite from the swelter of the day. Injustices continued accompanying human existence as they always have. It seems that the new reality brought on by the pandemic didn't change our notions of right and wrong in the most significant aspects of life. Some continue to trample on others' rights without the slightest bit of consideration. On the other hand, the little victories of justice, generally fewer and far between it seems to me, continue to light little sparks of hope and make it seem like not everything is wrong, bleak, depressing and hopeless. The little accidents and repairs of existence continue their course, reminding us that everything's fragile and has an end. Neither inanimate objects nor animate beings escape this reality of an endless cycle, a sell-by date if you like. Maybe what we should be focusing on is how that existence matters before that expiration date approaches. Talking about things that did change, our world of work transformed dramatically. Human interactions were required through means less human, and it took us a while to get to grips with this new reality. Computers, cell phones, and the internet became ever more active members of the family. Keyboards replaced markers, the intricacies of prosody in human language failed transmission through microphones and headphones. Unnatural ways of learning popped up in the realm of cyberspace, and the black boxes in the computer screen failed to transmit the subtle features of human interaction that we so took for granted. However, in spite of what seemed unnatural and uncomfortable at first, we ended up doing what humans do best: adapt to the new, make the new fit, and regain the notion of normality, even though it's a new kind of normality. Redesigning our professional world brought endless amounts of stress and drove us to seek pressure releases such as yoga. A day's worth of fatigue brought on by device use and intense thought processes was released in the evenings with this ancient and valuable practice of harmonizing body, mind, and soul. And it was a good moment for bonding with the feline members of the family who didn't quite share our notion of concentration. Our increased presence in cyberspace was accompanied by a sense of vulnerability. Stories of cybercrime and violation of privacy cropped up with increasing frequency, and to combat our fears, we had our very own practical session of tightening up security. I'd say that really our efforts of protection were comparable to an ant trying to avoid being stamped on by an elephant's foot. But never mind that. Rather than offering a real defense, our collaboration in this matter was more a gesture of human solidarity in trying to offer comfort in challenging times. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and we act with what little we have at hand. And talking about desperate times, life became very difficult for many people around the world, and our little corner was no exception. Human activity quietened down, streets became emptier, traffic jams disappeared, businesses had to close their doors for several weeks, and the hustle and bustle of life that provides enough for the daily bread almost came to a halt. Employment patterns changed quite severely, and this resulted in more door-to-door services being offered in the hope of human solidarity coming to the rescue. Visits of street vendors increased in our neighborhood, with their sonorous calls reaching out across rooftops, through windows, and piercing our eardrums, each call reminding us of the precarious state of affairs that we might have forgotten for a while in the shelter and comfort of our solid homes and jobs. Even artists had to implore charity to survive in times when audience halls are only filled with ghosts of those who once attended and the emotions they experienced.
Un saludo muy especial para Julio César de parte de sus amigos y de Mariachi Clásico Juvenil en Santa Teresita, Argentina, sí señor. Vaya, compañero. Estas son las mañanitas que cantaba el rey David. Hoy por ser la hechicera, eres linda y hechicera, malagueña, salerosa.
Consumption in the face of the pandemic became a dilemma. On the one hand, there was the urge to rejoice because the incessant wheel of superfluous production and consumption had received a rude shock, and the planet seemed to be enjoying a respite from the constant exploitation by mankind. However, on the other hand, there was a consideration that not buying would worsen things for the people whose jobs were in line. And then, of course, there was also the satisfaction of real needs as they popped up. So in the end, there were some new acquisitions, hopefully not of the superfluous kind.
Volea los pies. Ay, este entonces. Precisamente eso es lo que yo quería. Ay, sí. Las jarras, cuando necesitemos jarras de jugo, a las grandes están atrás, aquí las cordonas, las doy ahí. Cuando están calientes acá, las cosas están abajo.
Within this bubble of our lives in enclosure and isolation, and aside from the commitments of work, we sought pleasure and possibly a form of escape too, in old hobbies and experiments, and new ones that we picked up in quarantine. The word hobby usually carries the connotation of an activity that one develops as an optional extra in life, in addition to life's more necessary commitments. While that's true to some extent, it's also possible to view hobbies as more than just an optional extra, as a real need to enrich one's life with as many interesting experiences as possible. Well, quarantine reduced the scope of these experiences to the four walls of our home, and our access to the larger world was mostly through the internet. So, new experiences within this confined existence had to be discovered, and that's exactly what we did. New avenues in agricultural experiments were explored. The sound of the piano entered our lives, and the promise of budding musical abilities. Usual necessities of life had to be resolved, with new solutions, and in the process, discovery of new talents.
Corte de cabello número 3. De mono, ¿verdad? Esta técnica es nueva, toda innovadora. Esto se llama trimming en inglés. Ya cogí práctica. Se me fue la mano, se me fue la tijera.
First up, we'll make the classic garlic and lemon hummus. To a food processor, you just add 1.5 cups of...
Given the new practice of social distancing, visiting friends and family was at first prohibited and later frowned upon. Social relationships with friends and families separated by distance could only be maintained through the infinite possibilities offered by the World Wide Web. It's a strange kind of communication when you see a loved one behind a screen talking to you and listening to you in spite of being far in terms of physical distance. And not all of us feel as comfortable with the experience, but having that was better than no communication at all. We are social creatures who thrive in connections with those of our kind, and not being able to see the people you are fond of was an extremely tough experience for most of us.
Feliz cumpleaños, Vinica, ño 3000.
Humans slowed down in this new reality, but time didn't. Birthdays came and went, and the only way to show your affection for the person was through the screen.
Señores, con gusto, este día de placer tan dichoso, que tu santo te encuentre gustoso y tranquilo tu fiel corazón. Vive, vive feliz en el mundo, sin que nadie...
However, in our case, living in community gave us the opportunity to celebrate birthdays in person, a luxury most people didn't have. True to the Latin spirit, there was food, song, and celebration.
Feliz cumpleaños, gracias queridos, gracias a todos, gracias. Ha sido un día bacanísimo.
Ahora sí, señor sereno, le agradezco su favor. Encienda su linternita que ya pasa.
quiero darte un saludo de cumpleaños y desearte que tengas un muy buen cumpleaños, que disfrutes el almuerzo que tengas preparado, que le saques mucho gusto y que este sabor italiano te llegue a la vida, a la boca, al cuerpito. Feliz cumpleaños. Que nadie perturbe tu mente y pondremos un laurel en tu frente con el oro y las conchas del mar. Hoy los ángeles cantan en coro por los años que vas a cumplir.
¡Domicilio!
Negrita. ¿Qué es? ¿Qué es eso? Vamos a ver qué es eso. A ver, chao. Gracias y feliz día, disfrútelo. Uy, de la banda sonora para los amigos por el cumpleaños. ¿Para mí? Sí. Ay, gracias. Pero para mí también. No, hice para mí. Es para mí, es para mí. Es mío, es mío. Es mío también. Ay, pero mírela cómo hace, vea. Reconciliémonos, es para las dos. Gracias, amigos.
Regalazo.
Locos. No, pues claro, tenía fantasmas. Claro, cómo no.
Por favor, te haga patacones y no se
Quédate.
Talking about life in our little community, a common bond with food ruptured into our lives with the force of a hurricane. With our world suddenly reduced to the boundaries of our home, food became a central source of activity and bonding. First there was the acquisition, which had never been such an eventful adventure. Not being able to see the bug, which was devouring lives across the globe, made going out a traumatic event. We would take the necessary precautions, reduce our time out in the supermarket, plan our visits with careful consideration of the protocol established by the authorities, and in general, act as if we were in a hostile environment with an invisible enemy waiting around the corner to attack. These visits to the shelves were followed by endless hours of cleaning, and cleaning to avoid the chances of the bug infecting us in case it had decided to accompany us.
De aquí pasamos a subir. Miren este chiflado lo que le dio. O sea, lo único que le faltaba por hacer. ¡Ay!
These moments were stark reminders of the irony of the situation. With all the progress humanity is used to boasting about, the only thing that's effective in times of pandemic is soap. Simple old soap. Progress is exciting and fascinating because it takes you places you never thought possible, and it adds new dimensions to our idea of existence. But times like these do make you wonder if we just complicate our existence unnecessarily, and if simplicity is not really just bliss. After acquisition, what awaited were moments of endless experimentation, discovery, excitement, pleasure, satisfaction, and human bonding around the primordial necessity of life. The organization of modern societies has converted us into busy machines seeking unnecessary complexity, and the food industry has taken advantage of this to distance us from what, at the end of the day, matters the most: our food. Knowing your food, knowing how it grows, knowing how it affects your health, and knowing how it interacts with the greater idea of life on the planet, makes you realize that the stronger your connection with what you put inside your body day in, day out, the more peaceful your existence will be. Peaceful because of the control you can exercise over what goes in and what stays outside the sacred temple that your body represents. Also peaceful because your consumption becomes relatively free of the dark shadow of guilt based on the knowledge that what you choose to consume is not harming another form of life on our planet.
Atrás.
Estos camarógrafos. Ricardo, mire lo que es comida rica. Unos platos todos pobres.
Desabridos.
No. Estaba era cocinando. Ah, están igual, ¿así? Sí, pues sí.
¿Quieres tener mucho aquí?
Pero esperaba.
Uy, uy, uy.
Pues, con mucho cariño. Ah, eso está chévere, está muy chévere. ¡Salud! Salud. Ay, me quemaron. Ta-da! This is the treasure. Ay, cojamos todos de una y nos lo toman a todos.
Evidently, the feasts were accompanied with incessant chatter about our interpretations of the world. These sometimes gave way to reminiscing about the past. We dug into our archives to pull out meaningful moments lived in the past in the company of friends and family. Nostalgia reminds us that life is beautiful and that accumulating memories worth remembering is probably what existence should be about.
Ese no es Isaú. Ah, sí, ese es Isaú. Está por ahí. Y a mí casi se me pierde. Alfonso lo rescató.
No sabe qué pasa. Recordando Chocó.
Although such feasts were emotionally and nutritionally enriching, their evidence started to bulge out in our physical presence. So, true to the Greek tradition of maintaining a healthy mind and body, there were moments of grooming our vanity and keeping the body healthy. In fact, exercise also became necessary as an antidote to stress and lethargy caused by limited physical movement. And there were moments of discord too. Fortunately, these were few and far between, and affection always ended up having the upper hand. Now that we were not caught up in the rat race, we had a little more time for the loved ones around us. And there were quiet moments of contemplation too. Contemplation of the flora and fauna that coexists with us in our home, and conversations with the piece of sky that hangs directly over us. As I said earlier, human activity grounded down in speed, but time carried on its march as always. Of course, our notion of how quickly or slowly time passes is completely associated with our activities in daily life, and given the reduced hustle and bustle of everyday routines, it seemed like the seconds ticked away at a different rhythm. We started to observe processes of growth and change in nature to help us understand this new notion of time. Certain hours of the day were propitious for visitors of a certain kind, and behavioral patterns associated with time became a little more evident to us. Confinement within the walls of our home gave a new significance to the piece of sky that we can see from our patio. This was like an escape to the outside world without the danger of stepping out. The constant change of colors, shapes, textures, light, and atmosphere produced a sensation of change and movement in spite of the confinement. All of these observations gave life to new thoughts and ways of seeing and understanding life. The pandemic and the resulting quarantine produced a rude shock in our existence, but as always, human nature adapted somewhat to this new reality. Of course, we haven't returned to our previous patterns of existence. We still remain somewhat confined and distanced from friends and family, but the world around us seems to be picking up old routines with modifications of some kind. Of course, the pandemic had a transforming effect on mankind. Exactly to what extent and in what aspects will only become clear with time. For now, it's about living a day at a time and seeing what will come out of all of this.